So the first thing I really wanted to talk about that we didn't get to discuss the first time is what I call the California story or the coming to California story, because I find this to be very interesting with you because your entire career was essentially shaped on one day in California on your last door that you knocked on. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I had enough money to last me a week. I had traveled out there, uh, staying in the equivalent of a Motel 6. It was not very nice.
Mm,
And this was in 1974, I think. 75. Yes. And uh, and so I was just in awe of the place, and I had enough money to last me about a week, and I just went to every record producer's door I could think of, and um, left some demos. Tried to get in to see someone, but nobody would see me, and I knocked one of the doors I knocked on. Towards the end was Garrett Music. Snuff Garrett was a very happening producer at the time. He was doing Sonny and Cher, and I had done my homework. I went to see like Ted Glasser and Jerry Fuller and all the Jack Gold, and that's who I was trying to see because they were the producers that were cutting outside songs. And so I tried to get into Garrett Music, and this very nice man at the front desk said, "If you have anything, you can leave it, a tape or something." And I said, "Well, I was hoping maybe to see, to at least say hi and meet." And he said, "No, he's not here, and he's in the studio, and he really rarely does that. So just leave something." And I figured, oh well, I'm just gonna go home and with my tail tucked between my legs and consider this just a bad experience. And other than seeing Hollywood and doing a little sightseeing while I was out there, um, but I got back to my hotel, and my light in the hotel was ringing on the phone. And I went to pick it up, and it said, "You have a message." And it was a woman from Snuff Garrett's office saying, "Please give us a call." So, of course, I called right away. It was a little after 6 in the evening, so I figured nobody would be there. But this woman answered, and it was Snuff's assistant. And she said, "Snuff would very much like to meet you." And when can you do that? I said, "Well, I'm leaving. I'm heading back to Atlanta tomorrow." She said, "Well, can you come over now?"
hmm.
And I just got in my rent-a-car, drove over there. It was like 7 o'clock when I got there. He worked late, I was later found out, and he had listened to one of my songs, asked me to play a few more on the piano for him, and said, "When can you get out here?" And he offered me a gig and offered to move me out with I had a 6-month-old baby, and it was just one of those serendipitous, you know, golden Midas touch moments
Which has
that
have shaped your life and career so unbelievably. I feel like, reading your story, there's so many lucky moments and serendipitous things that happened to you over the years. um
yeah, but in talking to some of my colleagues over the years, and it has to happen to everybody.
mhm.
Whether you're a scriptwriter or an actor or a film writer or a director or a musician, a session player, aspiring to anything, you have to sometimes put yourself or find yourself in that moment when all the stars are going to line
Yeah, and you have to
line up.
create your own luck too at times too, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I always say my career has been based on number one, manifest destiny.
Hmm.
I've tried to create those opportunities for myself, and without even knowing how.
Hmm.
It's not like walking up to an artist like walking up to Elvis or the Beatles and say, "Hey, will you cut my song?" I mean, that's just stupidity,
Yeah.
obviously. But somehow you put yourself on the playing field, and sooner or later you get a chance to touch the ball,
Right, exactly. So this was a preemptive trip too, because you still had 6 months left on your deal in Atlanta. So there was a bit of red tape there from Snuff's side of things, where he had to work through your deal with Bill down there in Atlanta.
Yes.
As a young person at that time, did you realize kind of the limb that Snuff went out on for you at that point?
Yeah, I did. It was pretty incredible. I fulfilled my last 6 months with Lowry as a writer,
Right.
but I wanted to be in California because I wanted to arrange and produce and be in the scene, and because I knew those were the kinds of songs I was writing, and I just wasn't getting the traction uh, in Atlanta. It was limited for me,
And
and so I felt like, well, I'm just going to get on a bigger playing field here and see what can happen.
and of
And
course you had
and
that dream of film and TV as well, right? Yeah.
exactly, and I knew that's where I had to be. That was the right place for me.
Absolutely. I love that because in your book you kind of I love the chapter on Snuff, and we didn't get to talk about him really at all in the first episode. So I wanted to really touch on him quite heavily here. I love how in that chapter on Snuff, it's almost like a book in itself, where you're talking about the negatives and positives of what Snuff did for your career. Obviously, that last door knock completely changed the way Steve Dorff came to be. But at the same time, there were a lot of drawbacks to Snuff as well, just because of the way the business is and was.
Yeah.
And you signed a 3 year deal with him, and then another 10 years after that. So, did you feel some sense of loyalty to him, knowing that he went out on a limb for you, even though there was some drawbacks?
Absolutely, and he gave me all these amazing opportunities that you can only, you know, pray and hope for. I got to right away get into the studio and learn about recording in Los Angeles. I learned the great players. I started becoming friends with the great players. I started playing sessions and arranging sessions. So he gave me that opportunity. The drawbacks were, as I've written, and are pretty common knowledge, Snuff is a pretty controlling, or was a controlling person,
Hmm.
and he definitely put a harness on me in terms of certain things that I wanted to do and I was progressing towards, and he held me back from those things. So it was a real push and pull in terms of loyalty towards the end that that became kind of ugly, actually, and painful. And but I did ultimately leave, and that was probably the second best thing I ever did for my career, was leaving.
And what was the first?
Getting there.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, 'cause that's the chapter, right? That is the chapter on Snuff, the good and the bad. And man, I
Right.
love that, because you were there 13 years, so it was clear to me that there was a
It was
lot of
actually 10. It was actually 10.
okay,
10
so
years
10
and
total, right? So,
mhm.
but there were a lot of concessions you must have made over those 10 years, because, like you said in the book, he was very controlling, wasn't much of a musician, if at all, and tried to take credit for a lot of things that not just you, but other people under him were doing at the time. That had to be tough as a young creative person, right?
Yeah, but to be honest, it was part of the game then. Producers that weren't musicians or writers would take pieces of songs. Um, it just, the Donnie Kirshner's and the Wes Farrells and the producers of the day that were really businessmen. Not only would they take publishing, but they would try to take pieces of the writer's share.
Mm.
And I didn't know any different. I just thought, okay, well, that's the way the business works. So I guess I'll go along with it. And it wasn't until later that I realized that that really is a no-no. And of course, today in today's business, nobody really does that anymore. Um, but but so those were kind of the setbacks, and it was I made a ton of money for him
Mm,
over the years. He published all my hits, and uh, you know. Uh, So it was time for me to go out on my own, and that was a gamble. I was nervous to do that, um, and also I had to overcome the stigma of being Snuff Garrett's guy,
right,
which Leon Russell was before me,
right.
and I found out later on that Leon left for the same exact reason I did.
Yeah, it seemed likely for that. Yeah, you don't realize what somebody is dealing with until you're dealing with it yourself, right? Um,